In this video, I'm going to talk about the ISIS LSP authentication and also CSNP and PSNP authentication. As you remember, I configured and I talked about the ISIS Hello authentication in previous videos, but now I'm going to talk about the LSP authentication. In ISIS, we have two types of authentication, as I mentioned before. The first type of authentication is the Hello or ISIS Hello authentication. Let me to use the IIH authentication. Okay, I talked about the IIH authentication, and you know that how we can configure authentication for neighborship. This is the authentication for neighborship. And also we have another type of authentication. We call it LSP authentication. This means that we can send keys or passwords in the LSPs, or for example CSNPs and also PSNPs, and with this function we can prevent ISIS from some type of attacks. In this video I'm going to talk about the LSP authentication. Don't forget that if you have IIH authentication, this means that you enabled authentication for neighborship. But if you enable LSP authentication, okay, this is not for neighborship. Neighborship, for example, can be established without authentication, okay? But with LSP authentication, we can authenticate the LSPs or link states packets. First, I'm going to show you how we can configure the LSP authentication in this video, and after that, in final part of this video, I'm going to compare the configuration of both type of authentication with each other. Let me to start talking about the LSP authentication. The first thing that we should know is that we can configure LSP authentication with two methods. The first method is the authentication with clear text passwords. You know that this is the, for example, weak method, because we need to send the passwords in clear text, and this is a weak method. Attacker can sniff the link, and after that it can find the password, and this is not a strong method. And also we can configure LSP authentication with the MD5 in the new style of LSP authentication. Let me to talk about both of them. The next thing that we should know is that we have two style of configuration. The first is old style. In old style configuration of the LSP authentication, okay, we can configure only clear text authentication. You know that this is the old method, and in old method we didn't have the MD5 authentication. But in the new style configuration of the LSP authentication, we can configure both the clear text and also the MD5, for example, keys for LSP authentication. It's better to configuring only MD5 with the new style of configuration, but let me to show you all of the methods in this video. First, I'm going to show you how we can configure the, for example, authentication in clear text with old style. And after that, I'm going to show you the authentication of the LSPs with the new style, both in clear text and also MD5. Let me start with the old style configuration and then clear text. This is the first configuration that we can see in this video. First, we need to configure this scenario. This is a simple scenario only for understanding how we can configure LSP and authentication. Here we have router 1 and router 2 and router 3. Router 1 is the L1 level router, and also router 2 is the level 1-2 router, and router 3 is the level 2 router. Okay, and we can configure first this scenario with for example one notepad file, and after that we can enable the authentication. Okay, let me to start with the configuration of this scenario. This is a simple scenario. Okay, starting with router 1 en conft. Okay, then the host name should be configured to R1. Also we have two interface. The first interface is interface ETH00, and with the IP address of the 10.1.2.1, as you can see in the picture, 255.255.255.0. then no shutdown. Also, we have one loopback interface loopback, for example, 0 with the IP address of the quad 1, quad 255. This is the IP address configuration in router 1. Also, we can configure ISIS here. Let me to configure ISIS with router ISIS command. Then we need to configure net address with the 49.001. This is the area ID. Then quad 0, quad 0, 0001.00. Then we can configure the IS type as level 1. The next command is log adjacency change. For example, all. This is the configuration of the router 1 for ISIS, and then in the interface, for example, ETH00, we can configure IP router ISIS. Also in loopback 0, we can use the same command. If you want, you can use the passive interface command for enabling ISIS on the loopback 0. Interface loopback 0, then IP router ISIS. That's it. This is the R1 configuration for ISIS. Let me to copy this configuration, and after some change, we can use this configuration for router 2. This is the router 2. I'm going to configure router 2 here. enconf t, host name is router 2. In router 2, we have two interface, ETH00 and also ETH01. Let me to copy the ETH00's configuration, ETH00 and then ETH01. The IP address of the ETH00 is 10.122 and the IP address of the ETH01 is 10.232, then 2, okay, /24. After that, we need to enable ISIS on this router. This is the level 1-2 router ISIS. Net is 49.0.0.0.1, quad 0, quad 0.0.0.0.2.00. We don't need to configure IS type because the default IS type is the level 1-2, and then log adjacency change all interface ETH00 with the IP router ISIS command. Also, we need to configure ISIS, okay, circuit type, because this is a level 1-2 router. We need to configure the circuit type in every interface. ISIS circuit type is level 1 for the interface ETH00, and for the interface ETH01, the ISIS circuit type is level 2. Okay, that's it. This is the configuration. Here we have one Ethernet link. If you want, you can configure, you can change the type of the interface from the broadcast to the point-to-point. If you want, you can configure it. Let me to go to the router 3. This is the router 3. Here, I'm going to copy the configuration of R1. After some change, we can use it for the router 3. This is the router 3. Host name is router 3 or R3. And then we have interface ETH00 with the IP address of 10.233. As 255.255.255.0. Loopback 0's IP address is quad 3, quad 255. After that, we need router ISIS with the net address of 49.0.0.0.2, for example, quad 0, then 0003.00. IS type is level 2. Okay, and after that, log adjacency change all interface ETH00 IP router ISIS and interface loopback 0 IP router ISIS. This is the configuration of the router 3. Let me to first copying this configuration for router 1, router 2, and router 3. Here, as you can see, we don't have any authentication for neighborship or for example, LSPs. Copying the configuration of R1, we can paste it on the R1 CLI. This is the R1 CLI, and also R2 and also R3 without any configuration. First, we need to copy these configurations R1, R2, and R3 to the CLIs of these routers. After that, first, I'm going to check the connectivity between loopback 0 of router 1 and loopback 0 of router 3. If everything is okay, we can configure the LSP authentication and checking the or verifying the result. Let me start with the router 1. This is the router 1, copying the configuration. We didn't receive any error message, everything is good. And then in R2, we can again copy the configuration of R2, copying this configuration, and then pasting the configuration on the R2 CLI. This is the R2 CLI. Let me to paste the configuration. Everything is okay. Look at here, interface loopback 0, IP router ISS. Here we have one error message because in R2, this is the R2, we don't have it